Hello YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. I'm going to be talking about one of my, probably, maybe one of the most enjoyable subjects for me. Something that I've probably spent more time than I'm probably aware of thinking about in the past. Just mulling things over, always reflecting on things. Um, okay, so this subject has to do with music composition, and it has to do with harmony and pitch. Or at least but pitch in regards to multiple pitches sounding at once, so harmony and chords and that sort of thing, tonality, and as well as how it affects mood when you were talking about how the interaction with harmony and the other elements of music, as well as some related subjects. So I'm just going to be going through a lot of different types of harmonies and scales and that sort of thing, or tonalities, and talking a bit more about how they influence different emotions and moods in music. Again, in tandem with the other elements like dynamics or volume, tempo and rhythms and instrumentation and all those other things. So the first concept I want to talk about here in this video, uh, uh, it has to do with the harmonic series, and with all people viewing this video, my intended audience would be, I think, in this case, more for more advanced folks, at least more knowledgeable folks in college and that sort of thing, and beyond. But if certainly welcome intermediate level or other folks that are not quite as advanced. What I would suggest doing is, with each of these concepts I'm talking about, feel free to play them on a piano, mull them over in your own mind, um, that sort of thing. Again, there will be a point in the future where I'll be doing a lot more stuff with the horn and piano and more playing and other stuff, and just ask for your patience and stuff, that sort of thing. So, but so I'm assuming that I'm going to assume that a lot of folks watching this already know what I'm talking about with these different types of harmonies. But I'm going to go into a little bit of detail then again for the folks that aren't quite as familiar with some of these harmonies things. So the harmonic series is a series of pitches or interval relationships that exist in nature, such that when you play any note, when you sound any note, there's always a certain order of pitches that sound above that note. And so we have a word called timbre, Timbre. Timbre has to do with the strength, the volume of the different pitches above the fundamental or the pitch that you're actually playing. It has to do with the different levels of volume of different notes in that harmonic series above the fundamental. So some of those pitches, if they're in the higher range of the harmonic series, if they're louder, that will be a different kind of timbre than the lower pitches, or if they're all really loud, or if they're all kind of muted, it's all going to affect the sound, the unique sound of that you're making. And that this all has to do with a lot with math and sine waves, that sort of thing, sound waves. You can get really into the math of it. That's all sound and acoustics and all that stuff, and that's a fascinating subject. And I understand only some of this area, but it's something that you can get really into it. And it's a great subject. You can write some papers, as a PhD on the subject. And already, it's just an outstanding subject to get into. There's so much that we know about, so much that we're still being researched. In fact, a lot of more recent avant-garde composition is focused on not only microtonality, but looking at all these different overtones and how it affects timbre, and playing with those kinds of tones a little bit, and affecting the sound, and these subtle little adjustments, and a lot of electronic music basically out there that's getting into that sort of thing. So that's kind of the trend right now. So Anyway, so getting back to the harmonic series, the harmonic series starts with, again, any note you want to sing or play or whatever. You're going to have an octave above that note already sounding. It's going to be much softer, a little softer. Uh, so you have to kind of, if you play a note way down low on the piano, for instance, you'll hear that note above it, the octave above it, and the fifth above that. Again, these notes a little bit easier, especially if, like you say, you're playing a pedal or a great C or something like that. One of the lower pitches of the piano, and you're really hammering it. And it's also, especially, it's good to have a big, nice, grand piano, and it has really rich overtones. You can hear those overtones a little better. So again, that's you have the fundamental, which is the pitch you're actually playing or singing, and then the next pitch above that's going to be an octave, and then a fifth, and then a fourth, which is going to result in having another octave on top of the first octave you just above that. So again, you have your fundamental, octave above that, fifth, perfect fourth, which is the octave again, and then you have a major third, and then a minor third, another minor third, and by that point you're getting to the flat seven, dominant seven kind of sound. Another major second, which is going to result in the next octave above. Another major second, another major second. Then you're going to have a pitch that's not quite a fourth or 11th, not quite 11th, not quite a sharp 11, whatever. It's going to be kind of a funny tone in that harmonic series, a little bit out of tune. And then you're going to have another fifth. And then at that point, it starts getting into the half steps a little bit, with for the most part. But also you can get to these pitches via using fractions, like dividing a string, that sort of thing. And again, there's all kinds of information out there about the mathematical relationships between the fractions and that sort of thing. And but again, that's another. There's a whole bunch of subjects that are all really interesting that all have to do with this subject, that get really into math and again the ratios and everything and different tuning systems, and it's awesome. But anyway, it's quite advanced, so you have to really have your math mind going as well as your musical mind. It's a great subject. I highly recommend any composer, especially if analytically minded. I highly recommend a lot composers to get into this field. Again, there's a lot more that I have to learn about this as well. Just feel like I'm back in a calculus class again a lot of times. So, so the harmonic series, it's always worth studying. Always worth studying. Scales. So we know there's the major scale. There's the three different types of minor scales. You have the modes. You have the whole tone scale. You have altered modes. You can just change one of the tones or a few of the tones, and you just kind of play with those modes, or you can create your own modes. And then you have pentatonics and minor, major pentatonics, and you have the octatonic scale, whole step, whole half and half whole, and the blues scale, and you have I guess the Spanish scale, which is like the altered mode type scale, or dominant Phrygian, and all these things. On top of that, you probably have there's like the mystic chord, which is a harmony that Scriabin used, and you have I guess there's a exotic scale, or there's other scales. There's all kinds of scales out there. And we haven't even got into microtonality. We're just talking about 12-tone scales. So there's like the scales that are used in India, which a lot of times they're using a very different tuning, a little bit different tuning system, so you can get more divisions within the half step in India and thereabouts. So all these different scales we have all these different kind of colors and moods, and goes without saying, because the major triad and major scale emphasizes more pitches, generally the pitches that are they're closer to the fundamental of the harmonic series. The sound of the major scale, major harmony, major chord will be much more stable, and brighter and will tend to have an uplifting quality, which is why when you hear a major chord, a C, E, or G, or a D, F sharp A, or whatever, F, A, C, all these triads, G, B, D, that sort of thing, it always has that immediate, happy face quality about it. And I hate to make it so simplistic, but if you're writing music for something in a very joyous scene, you're not going to want to use, say in film score, you're not going to want to use anything probably other than something major triads or major chords, or something very, very related to that, at the very least. So the major chord, it is the go-to harmony, Um, and we'll get into a lot of these melodic ideas with the scale in just a bit. The minor chord, of course, it's a little bit darker. Now, with the major chord, of course, if you have a louder dynamics and more in the faster tempo, it's going to be higher energy, exciting. If it's loud but slower tempo, very stately, majestic. Softer dynamics, you're going to get very peaceful and stuff, especially if it's slower. There's all kinds of things you can do with the dynamics and the tempo and the instrumentation to kind of really customize the mood of a certain piece with major triads or major harmonies. With minor harmonies, you're definitely it's going to be a little darker, but more serious, or a little bit. By darker I mean not quite as joyous. Anything from just kind of being more serious to kind of the very despairing, or the frightening, or the just more troubled kind of moods. And you have three different kinds of scales. One of them, the harmonic minor, sounds very Middle Eastern. The melodic minor sounds very gypsy-like, or maybe Slavic, more kind of Balkans area. Or maybe Jewish a little bit, something like that. So, you have, I didn't mention the extended triads and the major. Well, I'll mention that here. So you have these, of course, in jazz, but also in film and movie themes and romantic era music. They use a lot more of the sevenths and the ninths, 11ths, 13ths, sharp 11s, or whatever, in their harmonies. Just basically 4, 5, 6, 7 note chords that are separated by thirds. And that have relation with, generally, we're talking about mainly major and minor here, but there's other types as well. And so when you start hearing these harmonies, that's where you get a lot of the bittersweet moods, or the very, very amorous, passionate moods, jazzy, kind of relaxing moods. But generally we're talking about moods that you have a teenager and adult experiencing more. They're not quite as childlike. And this is something I talk about. We learn a little bit more. It's more set in stone in Film Spring program. But we sometimes, for instance, for myself, I'm so fond of these harmonies that if I write something that doesn't involve richer harmony, 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, I really have to be very purposeful, and this is what I want. And I'm after this very kind of more, maybe more of a childlike, or something more. A lighter type of piece of music, so the extended harmonies are going to, have a lot of that depth and that weight that you maybe as a composer looking for something more emotional, especially if you have a really good melody. You don't have to just rely on those richer harmonies for that kind of effect, which is kind of we can tell when melodies are stronger and melodies are kind of so-so or not that good. So, So I'm gonna maybe save melodic stuff for a different video. How to write better melodies. That's a huge part of composition, and it's something that I think most people know. It's integral. It's one of the skills that you can get better at. But anyway, that's a different subject. So I'll make sure to talk about that a little later. So it's kind of covered major and minor a little bit. There's a lot of possibilities which you achieve with minor harmonies. There's also, there's chord function, that sort of thing. I'm going to mention that briefly before we go on. You have, generally in tonal music, music that has a tonal center, you have all the harmonies that you have the tonic and you have the mediant and submediant, um, which the 1, the 3rd, and the 6th, which are generally interchangeable. You can substitute any one of these chords in place of the other one a lot of times. It has the same effect of kind of being in a home base type of area. This is like your home base area. So of course if you're in major scale, the tonic is a major, has a major quality, and the 3 and the 6 are minor. If you're in a minor scale, generally speaking, you're talking about the minor 1, or the tonic chord is minor, and the 3rd and the 6th chords are major. If you're talking about diatonic tonality, more diatonic. So, and then of course you have your subdominant types, your 2 and 4, and your dominant, which is like your more of a climactic point, or something it's going right back to a tonic, or you expect to go back to tonic, not necessarily always. And then a lot of other kinds of chords are maybe considered non-functional, or they're you can have all other kinds of harmonies in there, in a lot of music. In this case, we're talking about chord function, but again, you have your generally tonic type chords, subdominant, which it sounds like it's kind of going somewhere, it's, going away from home base, and then your dominant chords that are you're thinking of it might go back to a tonic. And then of course 5 can be interchanged a lot of times with actually flat 2 chords. Generally not the diminished 7 thing, but again, I know you're more advanced music theory composition guys are going to know what I'm talking about, and I can go into more detail with any comments or any questions from folks that are not quite as knowledgeable about this stuff. So chord function, I guess, plays in here somewhat, but more in regards to is this some of the maybe more specifics about a certain scene, that a certain idea that someone's writing, or whatever. So incidentally, if you're trying to write something that's very Debussy-like, or avoids very common cadences and things, 5/1 cadences, so you're avoiding the traditional 1/4/5 thing. What you want to do a lot of times is, don't think about using the 5 unless you really want to use it. Just throw the 5 chord out the window and just avoid it. And have your melody and have your harmonies kind of move in a wherever you want them to go. But you could go back to the tonic at some point. It's just a question of when you're ready to go back there. But you don't have to keep having these regular cadences, that sort of thing. So, and there's all kinds of ways to do that, So anyway, definitely this would be a good video for lots of questions and comments on this. So, going to some less familiar harmonies, because major and minor harmonies should be so familiar. Maybe I'll mention actually dominant 7 dominant chords. It's essentially just your major triad with a flat 7 on top. And so for me, these are so common. They're very connected with more with major harmony, I think. But on their own, they can sound a little bit jazzy, but not really. It can be classical as well. It's just a question of how you use them. But if you have a sustained dominant kind of sound, if you have a dominant harmony that just keeps going and going, that's where you get more of the jazzy or the bluesy kinds of qualities that they might have, that chord kind of has in it. But if you only have, obviously a 5/7 chord going to 1, and it's very measured and it's very symmetrical, that's definitely going to be more classical style, of course. Diminished harmonies, your tonic, flat 3 and flat 5 harmonies, and all the extensions above them, half and full diminished, or 7 chords, so half and full diminished. And plus, you have your 9s, 11s, whatever else. Diminished harmonies are always going to sound more unsure, more probably suggesting anxiety So there's also kind of that full diminished, ascending full diminished 7 kind of sound that sounds a little bit. Uh, I've heard said it's kind of a turn of the century circus like thing, or kind of a oh boy, a little bit comic sounding. It's not quite as intense of a anxious kind of mood. It's more again a little bit lighter hearted, cartoonish kind of thing. That's the full diminished 7. Half diminished 7s can be a little bit more mysterious. But diminished harmonies to me always sound a little bit but not necessarily aggressive. A little bit more coming from the point of anxiety, or you're not sure about something. And again, a lot of it has to do with that flat 5 sound, the tritone. It's very unstable, and the harmony, diminished triads are referred to as diablos in music. I know you go more in detail with all that, but it was the tritone in particular was just considered the devil in music in the past, and talking about earlier on in Europe, and so a lot of folks wanted to avoid that kind of sound because it was so dissonant. Not as dissonant as minor 9 on its own, just without any or a minor 9 is really very dissonant, or minor 2nd in a way, but minor 9 it just, but the flat 5 is diminished 5th or augmented 4th is a little bit, can be a little bit jarring, especially in its own. But if you have the diminished sound, is going to be a little bit anxious sounding. Augmented harmonies to me always remind me of Russia. All the time, not necessarily just Russia, but a lot of Russians are fond of using that harmony. But it can sound cold, or it can sound a little bit, again, it's suspenseful. You have the James Bond chord, right, which is like the minor major 7 harmony, and it's a flat 3rd, a major 7, and there's an augmented. It's a combination of minor and augmented, because if you're just looking at the flat 3rd, 5th, and 7th in that chord, that those top 3 notes make an augmented chord. So that suspenseful sound in the James Bond harmony has to do, again, with that augmented combination of minor and augmented sounds. Like, say, for instance, C, E flat, G, and B. But there's all kinds of harmonies built off of an augmented chord. Augmented chords, like diminished chords, are not as common as major and minor, of course. I think that diminished chords sometimes have a function, kind of a glue chord, especially in minor pieces. Augmented chords, though, can be there more for more for effect. I think something that's a bit more kind of like a sforzando, augmented, brassy harmony. It'll grab your attention very easily. You also have, your suspension chords, sus4 chords, which, in classical music, they all tend to resolve to the 3rd. But anything, and this is going to tie in a little bit with the chordal quintal idea, anything built off of anything with fourths. A sus4 chord maybe is a little bit of a kind of a glue. It's in between the area of the majorish area and chordal quintal land, because your ear is expecting the 4th to go down to the 3rd, or major and minor 3rd. But so chordal quintal sounds, though, will sound a lot not quite as. I've often thought of 3rds as being more organic, emotional, full of life. And the chordal and quintal sounds sound more inorganic and technological or electronic, all these kinds of things, mechanical. And so, chordal harmony, C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. You can just keep going up or down. That's the relationship we're looking at. You can probably throw in some augmented 4ths, diminished 5ths, or diminished 5ths to make it sound a little different, or whatever. Get some more dissonant harmony there. But you have, or quintal harmony is essentially along the same lines. It just sounds maybe not quite as. It sounds a little bit more pleasing in a very open, again, kind of desert-like way. So a lot of stuff with the American West, It's going to have just open fifths, some fourths, but that has a real Americana kind of sound. That just that fifth idea. Yes, Aaron Copland. I'm looking at Aaron Copland's music here a lot. Not just him, but so you have tone clusters. Eric Whitacre uses a lot of tone clusters. Composed just live right now, and tone clusters to me, they're just all over his music. But when you hear seconds as a sustained harmony, yeah, it's kind of thick and richer that way, but it obscures things, and so I think it works very well for choirs if you're after a certain kind of otherworldly sounds. Particularly for choirs, I think that the tone clusters work really well. For other ensembles, it can sound a little bit muddier, depending on kind of what you're after emotionally. So, I'm always fascinated when composers use different kinds of combinations of all these things, because these are the building blocks of harmony, your basics. You can have chord extensions. You can have, I'm talking about melodies and counter melodies. You're always having these shifting, lines and things. I think it's important if you're trying to establish a certain mood, though, to be aware of, if you're trying to establish certain moods and certain points in your music, or if it's something for film, video games, or it's just a regular composition on its own, it's important. It definitely is important to be aware of what you're actually putting on, what you're putting out there. The less that music correspond to something that's that you're intending to be emotional or dramatic, or something that you have a certain effect on. If you're not after a certain effect on the listener, then geez, yeah, you can do a lot of whatever, But if you are after a certain effect, you should be aware of the effect that these chords will have on the listener, just organically, or just by the nature of the sounds of these harmonies. These darker harmonies are going to involve these intervals or pitch relationships that are a little farther up their harmonic series. That's why, and so again, the steps in the harmonic series, the scale steps are, or the tones that are more closer to the fundamental, they're going to be more consonant. The ones farther up are going to be more dissonant. So that's kind of anyway. So the last thing I want to mention in this video, it has to do. I do have my own harmonic language, how I understand music to work at a very basic level regarding pitch, and I see no reason to ever change this. I think this is pretty. For me, this explains everything I need to know about in music. All the relationships and everything. So I'm going to mention this to you guys, but feel free to adopt it as your own language, or you can change it as you see fit. But this is symbolic, or this is something that is not academic in nature, and this is again it's just for me it's how I emotionally make sense of harmony, or what these intervals might mean symbolically. So the tonic to me represents certainly a beginning. It can represent the beginning of life, or a beginning of something. Something is beginning. Theologically, it can represent God, of course, or it can represent a person when they're born, especially, or just the idea of like a one, just a one person. So that's the tonic. The minor second is definitely, I think, symbolically represents frustration. There's a kind of struggle to grow somewhere, but there's some kind of conflict. It's very dissonant harmony. The major second is a bit bright, it's a bit nicer sounding, but there's still a little bit of dissonance, mild dissonance, and so it's kind of, to me, it represents the idea of growth, that some character, something has grown, but whenever there's ninths or seconds in harmony, it makes the harmony richer, but it's not quite where it wants to go yet. The minor third, I think, to me represents sin, or evil, or the devil, but in kind of a very indirect way, not a very direct. It is that stuff, but it's It's kind of the I made a mistake. I've got to fix something, or it's something isn't quite right. But it relates a lot with major third, which is theologically representing maybe say Jesus, or the idea of resolution of some kind of pain or sorrow, something that's a lot happier and joyful. Um, so the minor and major third are very related, of course, and as you'll see later on, the thirds are also related to the sixths, and the seconds are related to the sevenths, and the fourths and fifths are related to each other. And the tritone is kind of on its own. But so of course the fourth, I might mention this with chordal harmony, is I think symbolically represents unaided human knowledge, like science and technology, but stuff that's kind of figured out by trial and error. And then the tritone, augmented fourth or diminished fifth, could represent symbolically ignorance of something, or a confusion, or some kind of state of emotional or intellectual kind of darkness, or someone's kind of stroke, or lost or whatever, or and then again the word ignorance comes to mind. The perfect fifth is definitely, to me, theologically might represent the Holy Ghost, or enlightened knowledge. So it's much brighter, and so then of course you have your Godhead in the major triad. But again, if you're not as theistic, whatever, the root, or any note plus the third above it plus the fifth, they're very fundamental intervals on the harmonic series. They lie very, very close to so that's why they're so consonant, and they all have relations with each other. The root and the fifth are very, building blocks of consonants, of course. They're just, you're talking about some very, very basic ratios there. Beyond that point, with the minor six, to me might represent a little bit of arrogance or eccentricity, that sort of things. And then the major six is a bit more humble sounding, a bit more maybe humorous, a bit more in a lighthearted or nice kind of way, maybe almost like a rustic kind of sound. Whenever you have major triads, for instance, that have a sixth added on, 13 over, just the sixth, they often have the ninths and the sixths, or the seconds and the sixths, whatever. But if you have the ninths and the sixths added on to major triads, that's where you get a lot of your 1950s malt shop type sounds. And so they're nice chord extensions, but they're not as emotive. They're not like the emotional sevens or sharp 11s, that sort of thing. So they're just nice. They kind of like the cherry on top of the idea with whatever. Your sevenths are going to be related to your seconds. Your minor seven, or dominant seven, or flat seven is going to be, to me, it symbolically represents urbanity and sophistication, and kind of a mellowness that's a little bit more, maybe mysterious, but maybe kind of it's just more relaxed, I think. And then jazzy, bluesy thing, perhaps. And the major seven is going to be much more emotional, longing, yearning for something very romantic sounding. It's more emotional, yeah. And then, of course, the next one after that would be your octave, and so then you'd be done, which might represent the octave itself, could represent symbolically how life kind of keeps going in circle life, back to God again. The nature of the nature of eternity, perhaps, all these kinds of things. So, but then all this stuff I'm talking about here, it's all more just, it's not academic, it's all very eternal, it's all very just kind of my own personal philosophies on music, that sort of thing. So, all right, hopefully this has been interesting or thought-provoking. I'll catch you guys a little later. Thanks. Take care. Bye.